Hello folks. We are going to present our Art 406 presentation, and the topic of our presentation is Post-Impressionism. The group members for this presentation are Akshay Chaudhary, Ankit Kumar Sharma, Anmol Chaman, Ashu Jayant, Charchit Bharani, Dipanshu Maheshwari and Garvit Tak. Let's start our presentation now. First, we start with the introduction. What post-impressionism was all about in a brief. Post-impressionism, the term first used by the art critic Roger Fry in 1906, is a predominantly French art movement that developed roughly between 1886 and 1905, from the last Impressionist exhibition to the birth of Fauvism. Post-impressionism emerged as a reaction against Impressionists' concern for the naturalistic depiction of light and color. Post-Impressionism encompasses Neo-Impressionism, Symbolism, Cloisonnism, Pont-Aven School, and Synthetism, along with some later Impressionist works. The movement was led by Paul Cézanne, who is also known as the father of Post-Impressionism, Paul Gauguin, Vincent van Gogh, and Georges Seurat, who are some of the major artists during the Post-Impressionist era. Post-Impressionists extended Impressionism while rejecting its limitations. They continued using vivid colors, often thick application of paint, and real-life subject matter, but were more inclined to emphasize geometric forms, distort form for expressive effect, and use of unnatural or arbitrary color. So here are some of the very famous paintings from the post-impressionist era. The right-hand side one being painted by Felix Vallotton. So here are some of the other artworks. The left-hand side one was being painted by Paul Gauguin and the right-hand side was being painted by Charles Angrand. So here are some of the other impressionist works.
Overview. The post-impressionists were dissatisfied with what they felt was the triviality of the subject matter and loss of structure in impressionist paintings. Georges Seurat and his followers concerned themselves with pointillisms, the systematic use of tiny dots of color. Paul Cézanne set out to restore a sense of order and structure to the painting, to make use of impressionism in something solid and durable. He achieved this by reducing objects to their basic shapes while retaining the saturated colors of Impressionism. Camille Pissarro, an Impressionist, experimented with neo-Impressionist ideas between mid-1880s and early 1890s. Vincent van Gogh used color and vibrant swirling brush strokes to convey his feelings and his state of mind. Although they often exhibited together, post-impressionist artists were not in agreement concerning a cohesive movement. Yet, the abstract concerns of harmony and structural arrangement in work of all these artists took precedence over naturalism. Younger painters during the early 20th century worked in geographically disparate regions in various stylistic categories, such as Fauvism, led by Paul Gauguin, breaking from post-impressionism. Now, here are some more artworks from this period. The left side being made by Maximilian Lewis and the right side being created by Ren Schutzberger. Now, here are some more artworks from the post-impressionist era. Left one being created by Maurice Bogot and right one by Charles Lavelle. Now, here are a few more artworks.
So now let's discuss the general characteristics of the paintings and artworks in the post-impressionist impressionism era. First, interest in building the shape, the drawing, and the expression of object and human images. Equilibrium between the volume and the pure aesthetic taste, which was suggested by Paul Cézanne. Painting compositions describing forms in terms of its underlying geometric structure, examples sphere, cone, cube, and cylinder, etc. Use of color contrasts for defining surfaces and forms. Use of advancing and receding colors to create depth in paintings, which was majorly suggested by Vincent van Gogh. Less emphasis on accuracy in drawing, which was again suggested majorly by Vincent van Gogh, and the use of parallel and expressive brushstrokes. So here are some of the artworks from the post-impressionist era. The left one being from Paul Signac and the right one being from Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. So some of the artworks here, left one being from Paul Ranson and the right one being from Georges Lehmann. So some of the other major artworks includes the left one being from Pierre Barond and the right one being from Paul Cézanne. So now we switch over to the influences. What were the influences and what were the implications of the post-impressionist era paintings on the futures? So, first one, from the impressionists, the taste for the color contrasts, mainly in the paintings of Cézanne. From Rubens, the non-impressionist and the Japanese cards, the chromatic richness, pure colors, and Van Gogh's curve line. And lastly, from the exotic sculpture of Oceania comes the Georgians' primitivism. So here are some of the major artworks, and the left one includes from Camille Pissarro, hanging at Eragny, 1889, private collection, and the right one being from Henri Rousseau. In this slide, the left painting is from Henri Rousseau and the right one being from Maurice Denis. So now we switch over to some of the major artists in the post-impressionism era, which includes Paul Gauguin, Vincent van Gogh, Georges Seurat, and of course the father of the post-impressionism era, Paul Cézanne.
Now, the first artist from the post-impressionism period, Paul Cézanne. His paintings covered the use of structure and volume through the use of geometric shape and definition of the forms through painted parallel brushstrokes. He tended to use primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. He used contrast and tones to build 3D form. He used advancing and receding color to create depth, and he sometimes used multiple viewpoints. His belief that everything in nature adheres to sphere, cylinder, cone, and cube was a main basis for his paintings of all subject matter. He influenced the 20th century Cubist movement. Some of the paintings of Paul Cézanne include Pyramid of Skulls shown on the left side and the Basket of Apples shown on the right. Paul Gauguin. His work has elements of symbolism in it. Flat shapes and bold curves are used. Little or no use of perspective. Colors used are often vivid with the use of opposite colors and contrasts. His use of color is highly expressive. He lived in Tahiti for most of his later life. He was to influence the movement Fauvism in 20th century. Now we see some of the paintings of Paul Gauguin. The Yellow Christ shown on the left and When Will You Marry shown on the right.
So now we switch over to Vincent van Gogh. Vincent van Gogh was a unique artist who worked with a sense of urgency which often caused him a great deal of stress. He was famed for his bold, dramatic brushstrokes which expressed emotion and added a feeling of movement to his works. Vincent van Gogh painted over 30 self-portraits between the years 1886 and 1889, reflecting his ongoing pursuit of contemporary color contrasts and a bolder composition. Van Gogh started to imitate Gauguin's technique of painting from memory, which resulted in paintings becoming more attractive and less realistic. Van Gogh's emerging style saw him emotionally reacting to the subjects through his use of color and brushwork. He deliberately used colors to capture mood rather than using colors realistically. No other artist was doing so at this time. Van Gogh said, "Instead of trying to reproduce exactly what I see before me, I make more arbitrary use of color to express myself more forcefully." The medium of his paintings was oil painting, and the subjects that he focused on were figures, landscapes, cityscapes, and scenery. So here are some of the prominent artworks, the left one being from Vincent van Gogh and the right one being from Henry Edmund Cross. In this slide, both the artworks are from Vincent van Gogh, the left one being called The Starry Night and the right one being called The Potato Eaters. So now we reach the conclusion of our presentation. Breaking free of the naturalism of Impressionism in the late 1880s, a group of young painters sought independent artistic styles for expressing emotions rather than simply optical impressions, concentrating on themes of deeper symbolism. Through the use of simplified colors and definitive forms, their art was characterized by a renewed aesthetic sense as well as abstract tendencies. Among the nascent generations of artists responding to Impressionism, Paul Gauguin, Georges Seurat, Vincent van Gogh, and the eldest of the group, Paul Cézanne, the father of the post-Impressionism, followed diverse stylistic paths in search of authentic intellectual and artistic achievements. These artists, often working independently, are today called as the post-Impressionists. So here are some of the references that we used to prepare our presentations, which mainly includes Wikipedia. So now we reach the conclusion of our presentation, and this is the end. Thank you so much.